God, I'm muted. There we go. Y'all missed that entire opening thing. That was brilliant. Oof. This is really good. We're off to a good start here, Dave.
I couldn't even see a microphone that was X'd out, so I totally thought I lost my sound. So
No. I turn it off. I turn it off on my end, so that way the mic doesn't show up oddly on the screen. So
we're good. We're good. I'm retweeting the Scott Fish community thread. It's got a bunch of start-sit questions. We're going to answer some of those for you guys today, like we do every week. And make sure you guys subscribe and drop your questions. We're here every Sunday to help you guys win some championships.
Yeah, I mean, we got one right off the bat, and I think we're going to see a lot of there's a lot of questions in Kansas City this weekend because we have Isaiah Pacheco, who's been the back, who's been the guy, who's been the bell cow, out this weekend, which means a lot of people are going to be staring a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jerick McKinnon option in the face. So let's start off with this one right here. Chuba Hubbard or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Which way you going with this one, Dave? Two backs. One has been heavily involved recently, and one hasn't been involved all that much.
Yeah, and you got a really tough matchup there with the Saints. So I'm still going to go with Chuba. I have him a little bit higher, and I have CEH and McKinnon back-to-back in my rankings, kind of cannibalizing each other's upside when, Chuba's really been, he's really been the belle of the ball over there for Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be it for me is Chuba Hubbard's been the guy pretty reliably in Carolina since Miles Sanders had started to fade and been banged up. So I don't think you can go to a guy who's going to be, not even the focal point of his team's rushing attack. I'm going to avoid Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon in a lot of formats wherever possible, because I do think that this game is going to turn into a shootout because the Bills defense can't stop anybody right now. And the Chiefs offense is without its best running back. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff through the air. I think if you really got to start a guy, that's going to be Jerick McKinnon then, because he's going to be more involved in the passing game than Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be as well. So next one here, Nathan Hayes asking Gerald Everett or Isaiah Likely this week. Mark Andrews is still out, correct?
Yeah, Andrews is out. It's a tough one. I am gonna go with Likely, but I literally have it one spot ahead in my rankings. I liked how he looked on the small usage he had. He did get 6 targets. He had 4 receptions for 41 yards. So not a huge week, but I did like his involvement, and I like the matchup this week.
Yeah, I think I'm going to mirror that Isaiah Likely pick. Just with Gerald Everett, it feels like Donald Parham's getting a lot of those crucial red zone looks that would normally make a tight end so valuable. Parham's just a bigger, dominant, better red zone threat. And they really seem to like to go to him around the red zone, which saps a lot of Gerald Everett's value. And then you're talking about Isaiah Likely in a Ravens offense that's really devoid of pass catchers. Isaiah Likely is a decent receiver. As you said last week, 6 targets, 4 catches for 40 yards, no touchdowns. He's been involved sporadically, but it feels like throughout the year with Mark Andrews in, but now that he's carrying the lion's share, he's going to get a lot of those Mark Andrews targets. So really like the Isaiah Likely play this week. Up next, PPR flex pick 2, Montgomery, Mostert, Sutton, and Ford. How you feeling about this? Which way you leaning with this stack of guys?
I think it's a good problem to have when you have this many good options. Montgomery, unfortunately, is becoming a little bit game script, but I love the game script for Montgomery this week. I love the revenge narrative. I think he at least gets 1 touchdown, so I want him in my lineup. And Sutton has been absolutely great, and so Ford is the easy out for me. And I would consider Mostert over these guys, but I have Sutton, Montgomery, and Mostert just slightly behind.
I think you got to play Mostert week in and week out. I think he's a must start. And I say that as somebody who absolutely loathes the Dolphins. So give me Raheem Mostert all day. And then I'm going Sutton. I just don't think David Montgomery, like you said, is getting that reliable, dependable workload. And last week, Jerome Ford, okay day at the office, but only 9 for 19 and 3 catches for 33 yards. He's staying involved, but it's been a lot more. They've thrown the ball a lot more with Joe Flacco. They've shown a willingness to get guys like Harrison Bryant and Elijah Moore the ball. Elijah Moore is a sneaky ad right now down the stretch because remember, Elijah Moore had some of his best games with Joe Flacco. Harrison Bryant also is doing really well. He got a bunch of work last week. I threw Harrison Bryant in a bunch of DFS lineups this week because he's been so involved. I mean, you look at just his usage rate last week. I mean, he barely registered on the stat sheets before last week's game. How are you looking and thinking about this Browns offense with Joe Flacco under center?
Yeah, I mean, I said it last week. I was confident in Joe Flacco's. They're gonna chuck it, and I really like Amari Cooper this week. Last week he was really on a nice pace, and while he was in there, he was getting almost 40% of the target share. Gets a nice matchup against Jacksonville. Flacco is probably gonna throw a pick 6 at some point. He might turn the ball over, but he's gonna throw the ball quite a bit, and I like the involvement. I prefer Njoku and Cooper over the other guys. Probably not going to sit anyone else other than those. Probably not going to start anybody other than those two. Ford is flex consideration.
Yeah. So moving on to the next one, we're talking about Josh Kelly. There's been some talk that Austin Eckler is going to be less involved with since he's been ineffective. I mean, Austin Eckler was highly drafted this year and he just has not lived up to the hype. I mean, where are you at with Austin Eckler right now, Dave?
Austin Eckler is, him and Cooper Kupp are guys that like name value. You have a really hard time not starting them or not ranking them high. But if you just did blind resume, they're guys that are barely making an argument to be starting. And so I would pick up Josh Kelly. We saw what he did early in the season. We saw what he did in the middle of the season. And so you have to factor that in. I'm not going to drop, Rashee Rice for him. But if I have a third tight end or a third quarterback and there's only 3 or 4 weeks left in the season, give me Josh Kelly. If Eckler gets hurt, Kelly could be the lead dog. And if we see where like Kelly's the Ezekiel Elliott and Eckler's the Tony Pollard in this offense, and this, we could see that happen where he's getting more of the goal line work and more of the first down work. And I want people that are getting volume. So I like Kelly.
I mean, and just remember, in one, we saw Josh Kelly get 16 carries for 91 yards and a touchdown, while Austin Eckler was also heavily involved with 16 touches for 117 and a touchdown. This Chargers offense could be built heavily around the run. And I think the thing that everybody's missing out on is a lot. Austin Eckler has been very good the last 2 years in fantasy. However, I think the extent of his talent, the extent of his fantasy success has been based around a lot of PPR points and half-point PPR points because he's been just an absolute target last year. And this year, his pace has fallen off. I mean, through 9 games, he's been targeted 47 times. Last year, he was targeted 127 times. The year before that, 94. He's a very good pass catching back who's not getting targeted as much. His yards per reception are up, but he also hasn't been able to find the end zone like he did the last 2 years. So this Chargers offense looks like it's stalling out at times and doesn't seem and Kellen Moore seems like he's struggling to figure out how to appropriately integrate Austin Eckler into his offense. So, with all that being said, I do think you got to go Josh Kelly and have him at least on your roster, if not maybe in your lineup this weekend. All right, we got a tough one here. Russell Wilson or CJ Stroud?
This
I mean, CJ Stroud has a Jets secondary today in New York. And then we got Russell Wilson playing in the Dome in LA, taking on the Chargers.
Yeah, weather could be a big factor today with a bunch of teams, all the Ohio teams, all the teams that are playing on that, Northeast coast. I'm
through
gonna
the
go
Southeast here. Anybody who's playing outdoors here, but I don't think anybody's in Washington today because because it's raining and it's supposed to rain all day throughout the entirety of the Southeast.
Yeah, it's rough out there. Like this is tough. This football weather, but it's tough. And I'm gonna go Russ. I feel like he's safer, and I hate to say that because I love Stroud, but I'm gonna go Russ here.
Russ is safer.
It's the Jets. I mean, you got the Dome, the Chargers plus matchup, good weather. That's why it's safer.
I mean, I guess my problem with Russ is he's got more games where he's been under 200 yards passing than he has over 250. He threw his last 3 games, 186, 134, 259, 193, 114, 194, 95. He's not throwing the ball all that much. I mean, he's throwing the ball, but they're not getting yardage.
The yardage has not been there like last year, but the turnovers have not been there like last year. And those turnovers will raise a lot of points. He's rushing the ball more, and he's far more efficient. He's thrown for more touchdowns this year than he has last year already.
I mean, with CJ Stroud, you're looking at a guy who over his last 5 games, his lowest yardage output was 274. And he did have a 3 interception game against Arizona. So he's 4 interceptions, 1 game under 300 yards, and that was 274. And he's 11 touchdowns against 4 picks over his last 5 games. I don't think I can sit CJ Stroud, even if he's playing the New York Jets, because the other part of that equation is the New York Jets are going to not be able to move the ball well on offense still, which means CJ Stroud's going to get the ball back. The defense is going to get tired, and tired defenses give up points and yardage. Add in that Stroud's been a little bit more willing to run the last couple of weeks, and I think you just have a higher upside with Stroud that I want in critical weeks. I don't need a safe play. I need a winning play in week 14 of the fantasy football season.
They're 2 spots ahead, differential in my rankings. So I'm okay with either of them. I'm not like trying to sit Stroud. He's QB 13 for me. So
yeah. No, I get it. There's a very clear question there, and they are close. And this is just my thought process about why it would be CJ Stroud. All right, we got another good one here. We got Brandon Cooks and Jaden Reed going up head to head against each other. Jaden Reed and the Packers are playing on Monday night at the New York Giants. Brandon Cooks and the Cowboys are playing tonight against the Philadelphia Eagles, but they are at home. Which way are you going with this one, Dave?
I have Cooks as wide receiver 27 and Reed at wide receiver 32. I think they're both in flex consideration. Cooks might have a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think for me that's going to come down to just I like Cooks better in this spot. Cooks has touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 games, including that 173-yard demolishing the last time they played the Giants. So I'm looking for him against the Philly defense that's kind of soft. to give up a lot of yards, to give up a lot of opportunities to Brandon Cooks. He is a pro. He is a vet. He started a little slow, but he's really come on down the second half of the year here. And Jaden Reed still has his high yardage on the season is 84. Like Jaden Reed still hasn't taken that step that everybody's been thinking he can make, because this Packers offense doesn't feature any big receivers. They just have a lot of guys who are decent. So they're spreading the ball out around a lot, and Jordan Love's running the ball more, and that's what's generating the offense. So Brandon Cooks just feels like the clear play. All right. Brandon Savage asking full point PPR, Raheem Mostert, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or Adam Thielen.
Yeah, so Mostert is the easy one for me, and so I have to look where I have Thielen and CEH. I'm pretty sure that I have CEH slightly higher than Thielen this week. It's been really tough for Carolina, and then now they made the change to get rid of all of the main decision makers on offense, which, don't get me wrong, the offense was really bad and needed some change, but it's probably because they need 5 new offensive linemen more than they needed the coaching change. So I'll go with CEH because he's on a better offense, and I go with Mostert. But CEH and Thielen are very close.
Yeah, it's definitely Raheem Mostert for me. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just I don't know that I can get behind him as a play this week, just because he has one game of more than 50 yards this year. He just hasn't been involved. He hasn't been a guy, and I don't know that I want to trust him. His one good game came against Chicago in a blowout.
Here's the thing with the Kansas City backfield. No, we're not there yet, but we have CEH hasn't done anything all year. McKinnon was inactive last week with a groin injury. And then we could see Deneric Prince out there. And, we heard a lot of buzz about him this offseason. So it could be a 3-headed monster. They could pass the ball a whole lot. You just don't know. I don't feel very confident in anything. The only thing I would say, the reason I have CH above the other guys is because I do think he gets the short yardage work. And that's why I would have him above the other Kansas City backs. And looking at my rankings, I do have Thielen a little, just one spot higher, but I'm gonna switch that. I got CH over Thielen.
I'm gonna give one of my infamous answers of you need to go add Jonathan Mingo right now, Brandon. If Jonathan Mingo is available in your leagues, you need to go get him. This is a guy that this team drafted, and they've been getting involved. He's started to see an expanded role, and with Adam Thielen taking a step back, and the way Adam Thielen's been, the way he's been talking, it sounds like they're trying to get their young guys more involved. Over the last 4 weeks, Jonathan Mingo's target totals 10, 6, 6, and 7. So he's been getting the ball. They've been feeding him the ball. In the last 2 weeks, he's really taken that step forward. 4 catches for 60 yards last week, 6 catches for 69. He's a guy they're going to look to get the ball in. Those were in tough games against Tennessee and Tampa Bay. They got a tough Saints matchup this week, but I think they'll be behind, and I think they'll be feeding him, and they're going to try to get him the ball. Add Jonathan Mingo before your playoff push to try to capitalize on that expanded role. They drafted him in the second round for a reason. Second-round receivers are the greatest value in the NFL right now. They're guys that you need to target in fantasy, especially obviously he's rostered in Dynasty, but even in redraft, look at those second-round receivers late, because this is the time of year where they really take that breakout and make that next step and become highly valuable down the stretch. All right, Making Bacon live from New Zealand. He's down under the Kiwi. We got Damian Pierce, Javonte Williams, or Zach Moss today.
Zach Moss. I know he let us down last week, and I know that that's a tough call. ECR currently has him at RB3. I'm not that strong, but I still have him inside my top 10. I just think he's going to get a ton of volume today. I like his touchdown potential, and I like his involvement in the passing game. So give me Zach Moss.
Yeah, I think Zach Moss, even on a disappointing day, he against a tough Tennessee defense, ran for 50 yards still. He didn't hit those gaudy numbers he hit earlier in the year, but he got 51 yards against a team he gashed for 165 and 2 touchdowns earlier this year. I mean, I would really, you got to stick with Moss. I don't want anything to do with Damian Pierce because I think we saw that Devin Singletary is the better running back, but they're going to go with the split because the offense works, even if they're splitting their backs, even though Devin Singletary looks really good when they're giving him 20 carries a game. And I want to be in on Javonte Williams, but he's just been a little inconsistent. And, he hasn't really topped out on yardage. He's getting the touches, but he hasn't really been able. He's found the end zone twice this year. Samaje Perine, they put Samaje Perine in at the goal line, and that just really kills any value there.
I like the matchup with the Chargers. I got a late RB1 for Moss. I got an early a high-end RB2 for Williams. And then I'm not even thinking about the other option here.
Yeah. We have a good – Macon Bacon has another good question. Is Jameis Winston starting? As far as I know, Derek Carr is supposed to play, but we'll talk to Sebastian here in a little bit when he comes on and talk about that. Vikings with Jefferson back, or are they? I don't fully understand that one.
Is Minnesota playing in a dome today?
Who are they playing? Minnesota is playing Vegas. Yes, they're in a dome.
Yep, they're in a dome playing against the Raiders.
All right, another Stroud question. CJ Stroud or Baker Mayfield today?
That's easier. Stroud for me.
Yeah, Baker. Baker does get to play Atlanta, which is, not exactly a challenging game. Earlier this year, he went 27 for 42 for 275, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Baker's he's good for 2 touchdowns a game, but he's also a 50-50 chance to throw a pick. And he's not putting up the gaudy yardage totals that you'd want. If you're really nervous about that New York Jets defense, you could talk me into Mayfield in the dome in the better weather, but I still just think I want CJ Stroud because CJ Stroud with Nico Collins, Noah Brown, Brevin Jordan back. Brevin Jordan is, just remember Brevin Jordan was just a few seasons ago was the up and coming tight end until Dalton Schultz arrived in Houston. I can't bail on CJ Stroud. It's still CJ Stroud for me.
This was the easy one for me.
Yeah. This week, Dolphins or Packers defense. Who you want this week?
So I want Packers this week, and I want Packers moving forward. They are really close, and I do think maybe this week Dolphins are maybe a better matchup this week, but moving forward, the schedule for the Packers is beautiful. And so you can't just be thinking about 1 week right now. You need to be thinking about your championships. They got Carolina coming up, Tampa Bay. Yeah, Green Bay for me.
Yeah, you could go either this week, but I think Green Bay is probably the better play down the stretch. Additionally, you're getting into December, so that means we're getting into bad weather games, which will favor the defenses as always. Just as you're starting to think about things like that, now is a good time to look at all of the playoff matchups, start thinking about who your defense is going to be and try to get them on your roster early before playoffs begin. All right. Breece Hall or Zach Moss today. Where are you going with this one, Dave?
I have Moss. He's on a much better offense. Hall is definitely the better player, but it's just, we've seen even with decent volume, it's just so inefficient because this offense can't sustain drives. They're getting their first down in the third quarter. They have less than 1 touchdown per game, which would be the first time since 2006. It's bad.
Yeah, I love Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall is probably a better player, but somehow Zach Moss is in the better offense currently. And Zach Moss is, he's had a career resurgence in Indy. It's been absolutely phenomenal to see. Zach Moss always seemed like a really great dude. In Buffalo, he struggled, but so did everybody behind what was a bad offensive line. And guess what? That offensive line coach and strategy went to the Giants, and look at where it got them. I mean, Dave, you can talk to that. How bad has that Giants offensive line been this year? They got Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor hurt for extended periods of times.
Yes, with Andrew Thomas out, it's been really bad. I will say Andrew Thomas has been back, and then that's why you've seen them much better the last couple of weeks. But without Andrew Thomas, they literally had Justin Pugh off of the couch starting at left tackle because as soon as he got there, the third string guard that was playing left tackle got hurt. It's been so bad, but it has been better the last 2 weeks.
All right, another Clyde Edwards-Helaire question, and this is a new angle on this one. Clyde Edwards-Helaire or DeAndre Swift today? Who are you liking?
I got Swift. Yeah, I'm hedging my bet with McKinnon and CEH. I got them both in the mid RB3 range. I think they combine for maybe RB1 production, RB2 production. DeAndre Swift, I have right outside my RB1. I like him this week.
Yeah, for me, it's got to be DeAndre Swift. He's just been the better player all year. He's been consistent and he's been good quite often. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not been that great. And defensively, the Cowboys can be vulnerable to the run. They've given up more than 100 yards a couple times, including a 170 to the 49ers and a 220-yard game to the Cardinals. So that's just been huge. All right, next, D Wicks. Does Wicks have value in Green Bay? For those of y'all wondering who D Wicks is, Dontavian Wicks, 6'1" wide receiver out of Virginia.
He was my sleeper pick when Fantasy Pros asked for some sleepers on their article this week. I wouldn't necessarily start him if it was a standard 2 RB, 2 wide receiver flex. I think I have him at wide receiver 48, 50, or 49. But, Adam, Aaron Jones is out. Aaron Jones is trending towards being out. Luke Musgrave is out. Lacerated spleen, I believe. Christian Watson, that looked like the video game where they hurt their hamstring or back in the day. It was the NFL game day.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to be coming back for a couple weeks. So Wicks is like the fourth option in that offense as far as receivers right now.
Here's how I'm thinking about this and just how I'm approaching it is when I have questions about guys, I like to go to Underdog and I check what does Underdog have available for a pick and play this week, because Underdog does a good job of keeping their finger on the pulse of things. The only thing you can get in on right now for Dontavian Wicks is higher than a 0.5 touchdown rushing or receiving. So they don't even know what to make of him, which means if they don't know what to make of him, a guy who's had 4, 4, 4, 5, 4 targets the last 5 weeks, I think that's worth an add, especially in an offense that is searching for a top weapon. I would add him. I wouldn't start him this week. But I like him. Maybe you're putting together a DFS roster and you're sprinkling some Dontavian Wicks deep down there, just as a leverage play, because he isn't going to be in a lot of lineups in contests, and he's going to have a low price point.
Yep.
All right, Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Gus Edwards?
I got Gus, but it's so freaking close.
I mean, this is where it really starts to get gross when we get into the Gus Edwards, Clyde Edwards-Helaire conversation, because Gus Edwards, again, his high yardage on the season is 80, and he's averaging closer to 40 something, and you're hoping for touchdowns with him. I think it's got to be Gus Edwards purely because Gus Edwards has shown an ability to get into the end zone often. I mean, last week was the first week he'd been without a touchdown after 5 straight weeks. And 3 of those 5, he had multi-touchdown games. The Gus bus makes a stop at the end zone. It's an express stop, and it doesn't do anything else, but it goes to the end zone.
Yeah, last week was 2 weeks ago was the first time Keaton Mitchell out-touched him, and then we have the bye week. And so, the concern is that Keaton Mitchell's going to take over this backfield. And we did see a lot of teams after the bye week last week switch to rookie running backs last year. It happened with 3 or 4 different teams. James Cook saw an uptick. Pacheco saw an uptick. Rashad White, Tyler Algier. I mean, it could happen, but Gus is the goal line back, and this is one of the best offenses. They're scoring over 30 points a game in the last 5 weeks in a row. Like, I want some of that. I think the touchdown possibilities, I don't know what Underdog says. I mean, I think anytime touchdown for Gus Edwards is a lock.
Yeah, and that's just it. Baltimore's always had some back and forth at their running back. They bring in a lot of guys, so I would rather have Gus Edwards there. Gus Edwards has a whole mess of plays that you can make. You can get a spicy play over higher than 0.5 rushing receiving touchdowns right now, which feels like something you need to do. Maybe we'll lock that in as one of our plays this week. All right, next question. Who would you start in your flex today, Noah Brown or Keaton Mitchell?
Keaton Mitchell. I will keep an eye on the weather for both these games, but I think the weather's going to be bad in both. So I'll check that out in a second. But yeah, it's not looking good. Yeah, Mitchell though.
Yeah, I like Keaton Mitchell. But I think I'm going to go Noah Brown, actually. No Tank Dell, no Dalton Schultz means there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Nico Collins and Noah Brown. So give me Noah Brown. So we're no help to you there, but the potential for the shootout, for the high volume for Brown, I just really like, because I don't think Houston has a team where they can put it on the ground and run it even in bad weather.
I got the weather pulled up. Whenever you want me to run through it, I can.
All right. All right. Henry Ford McKinnon, PPR, start 1.
Henry.
Yeah, I think that's a very clear Derrick Henry. But we are to the point where we're starting to talk about it, because Tajay Spears has looked good. If you're in a keeper league or something where you can stash Tajay Spears and get him at a great value next year, I think you need to do that, because I think there's a chance that Derrick Henry won't be on the Titans next year. All right, half-point PPR, Zay Flowers, Drake London, or Brandon Cooks. Which way we going with that?
Right now, currently, I have Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers 26, Brandon Cooks 27, Drake London 28.
Yeah, Drake London had his second worst game of the year last week with a 1 catch for 8-yard performance, but it came against the Jets. It came against a really tough Jets secondary, like we talked about, and he doesn't have a good quarterback, so he's going to be at a disadvantage there. Playing against Tampa, they have a little bit better chance. Earlier this year, he went 6 for 54 against Tampa in what was a low-scoring game at Tampa. They're indoors in the Dome, like we talked about. I don't know that I want to go to Brandon Cooks, but I think I need to go back to Brandon Cooks, because I think Drake London and Zay Flowers are better talents. But I just think that with how their offenses are working around them, particularly in Baltimore, where we're still waiting for Zay Flowers to get back to his early season double-digit touches that he was getting and double-digit targets that he hasn't been able to get back to for whatever reason. So I think I got to stick with Brandon Cooks against that Eagles secondary that's looked like it can be victimized early and often. Keaton Mitchell or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think that's a real easy one. I think that's Keaton Mitchell for both of us. We don't want it. We don't want any part of that Chiefs backfield. We would much rather start Keaton Mitchell, who feels like a guy who's on the rise and will deliver, has higher upside potential, especially coming out of the bye week with Gus Edwards being Gus Edwards. I mean, he's fine, but Keaton Mitchell looks like he could be something special. Anything else to add on that one, Dave?
Nope.
All right. Trevor Lawrence, Matt Stafford, Geno Smith. We got to start 1. Carrying 3 quarterbacks. Bold move, Cotton. Bold move.
Yeah. And you have injured quarterback, bad matchup, bad weather, injured quarterback. Geno is going to be a true game time decision with a groin injury against San Francisco. He's out. Lawrence is active. He is got a high ankle sprain, or not a high ankle sprain. He got an ankle sprain, and he's playing against Cleveland. I'm going to go with Stafford, and I hate it. I just don't like any of these options, but I'm going to go with the guy that is not injured right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're going up against a Baltimore defense that's seen a resurgence, particularly against the pass. They have yet to allow 300 yards passing on the season yet. They're high on the season against is 253 through the air. So I'm really nervous about Matt Stafford this week. Granted, I don't think they've played a passing offense like the Rams yet this year. They haven't played anybody with weapons that good, other than maybe the Lions. And they did beat the Lions, but the Lions still threw for 250 on them. So I think Stafford is the play here. Lawrence against a really tough Browns defense in bad weather, while banged up, is something that makes me really nervous. And no Christian Kirk in that game. Don't forget that either. So I think it's got to be. I think it's got to be Stafford. I don't love it, but it is what it is. All right, Amari Cooper, Jaden Reed, Gabe Davis.
Yep, Gabe Davis and T. Higgins.
T. Higgins. PPR start one. Where are we going with this one, Dave?
I got Amari Cooper. I'm very confident in Cooper this week. He's at home, which gives me confidence. He cleared concussion protocol, and like I said last week, he was really looking good with Joe Flacco, and he was the number one read for Flacco, 38.9% of the targets while Flacco and him were playing together. It was a short sample size, but I'm going to go with Cooper against Jacksonville.
So you're not worried about that bad weather in Cleveland impacting the Cleveland offense today?
I mean, I'm not having Cooper in my top 10, but none of these guys are really top options. The second guy I have is Davis, but I have Cooper 3 spots ahead of Davis.
Yeah, I think I'm going Gabe Davis purely because I think that's a shootout in Kansas City, and I want pieces of that game. I want pieces of that game in my lineup. And don't forget what Gabe Davis infamously did 2 years ago in the playoffs against Kansas City. And Gabe Davis had a big week, has had some big weeks recently, and it's been really good to see him getting more involved in the passing game. Last week, he went 6 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. You know, when they target him, he's getting more involved. He's showing that he can be that complete player. And in a big must-win spot, I think they're going to have everything on the table. The Bills are in must-win from now until the end of the season. Everything's in, everything's involved. They're going to be taking shots. They're going to be doing everything in their power to win games and keep the game in Josh Allen's hand. I want Bills receivers in my lineup every single week with that. All right, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard, James Cook, or Javonte Williams?
Pollard for me, and then Javonte.
So why Tony Pollard as the pick there?
This is going to be a big game. I think they're going to have to pass the ball a lot against this Philly front, so I think Pollard is going to be heavily involved in the receiving game. Points per reception. Give me a lot of Pollard in these 2-minute, 4-minute offenses.
So James Cook has been really he took a step back last week, but he's been heavily involved. He's been getting close to the last 2 weeks. He's gotten 20 touches a game. He went over 100 scrimmage yards each of the last 3 weeks. He's been on a little bit of a heater. And Tony Pollard really hasn't, and it feels like they're looking to have him less involved. So I just think James Cook is better right now and is more likely to keep his workload because even if he makes a mistake, they're putting him back in the game and using him heavily. So I really like James Cook this week. And I know I'm a little bit of a homer, but I think James Cook looks like a guy on the rise, whereas Tony Pollard feels like a guy who could be replaced next week if a backup looks good.
That's a strong last take there. I mean, Pollard has been, but he also hasn't played in the fourth quarter in a month. The Cowboys are putting him on ice at the end of the game when they're blowing these teams out. I don't think he's going to be replaced. I think Rico Dowdle is being involved as the Cowboys are getting ready for, I hate to say it with the hashtag Dallas sucks, potential playoff run. And so it makes no sense for them to be pounding Pollard to the ground when they're up 20 at half. But I think this is a much closer game, and you're going to see more Pollard.
Yeah. All right. Macon Bacon asking about the Eagles against the tight end. the last couple weeks. I mean, or do we? So do we think it's Jake Ferguson or CeeDee Lamb is the main target today for Dallas?
CeeDee Lamb. It's going to be CeeDee all the time, but Ferguson is, him and Cooks have been the second and third options. And Ferguson is a great red zone target for Dak Prescott. So one of the weaknesses on this Philly team, the secondary has been weak. They added Kevin Byard, but they have no linebackers. And every time they add a linebacker, they get hurt. Zach Cunningham, I don't think, is playing, which he's not a good coverage linebacker. So I like Ferguson. I got him as my tight end 6 this week, but CeeDee Lamb is the main target.
Jake Ferguson has had 10 targets in one game this season, and it came against the Philadelphia Eagles. He went 7 for 91 with a touchdown. And then last week, against the 49ers, George Kittle, 6 targets. The Eagles, like you said, are giving up production to tight ends. So I really like Jake Ferguson this week.
They're middle of the pack against tight ends. They're 14th against as far as points per game, but I think recently it's been more.
So if you're going to pick one way to attack this on underdog, you got a couple of options. You got a 0.5 rushing receiving touchdown for Jake Ferguson, 4.5 receptions, 44.5 receiving yards, 3 first downs, 6.5 targets, 9.25 fantasy points. Which one of those are you going to attack for him?
I'm going to go with the fantasy points because the touchdown gives you that's like the money ball.
Mm-hmm.
And in this game where there should be a lot of fantasy points and fireworks. But if he goes and gets, I think it's half point scoring on underdog. If he goes and gets 4 or 5 catches for, 50 yards, that's still going to get it for you. So I think you can kind of hedge your bet by just going with the fantasy points.
Yeah, I think it's really clear that feels like an opportunity play for Jake Ferguson, because all of those, as I'm looking through those, I'm just like, I could see any of those happening. And one of those really sets you up because the 9.25 fantasy points, like you said, 1 touchdown, it probably does it for you. And he's been heavily involved. Why wouldn't you go back to a guy who's been heavily involved in his offense? And why wouldn't you want that guy in the lineup? Dave, what matchups? How's your teams looking this week? Are you playoffs in all your leagues, or are you still battling it out in the regular season?
I think I'm in the playoffs in most of the leagues that I'm not tanking, but there is one that I'm looking at going, I don't think I'm going to make it just because the other guy's facing literally nobody. So I have to beat the number 1 team to be able to do this. So that team's probably not going to make it.
Yeah. All right. One more question. Joining us is Sebastian Fearon, the SGPN, one of the DGen docs. But let's talk about this. Need one for the flex. Nico Collins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or Jerick McKinnon. Who we going with this week, boys?
Morning, gentlemen. Morning. Happy Sunday. Happy almost playoff time. I'll kick it off. I'll go with Nico Collins there. Obviously Jets defense is good, but I think it gets to a point where they kind of almost give up because their offense is so bad. And I think that CJ Stroud, no matter who's in there, is going to keep throwing the rock. So I will trust Nico Collins there.
I'm gonna go Nico as well. I don't like Sauce, and I'm a little worried about the weather, but Nico's just been so good, and he's gonna get so many targets. No Dalton Schultz, no Tank Dell. He could get 13, 15 targets, even with Sauce on him.
Yeah, and even if we think about it from a Sauce Gardner, everything else, Dave, you and I talked about it. We're just avoiding all things with this Chiefs backfield. We don't want anything to do with either of these guys. And so give me Nico Collins. That just feels like the clear choice. So Sebastian, I know one injury that people have been watching all week is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence injured last week with that ankle injury. Talk about what you're looking at today for him, how he's going to play, how you think he's going to do. And just take us through what that looks like against a tough Browns defense for him today.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, so obviously we all saw last week, what was it, that Monday night game with Trevor Lawrence going down, throwing his helmet in frustration, looked pretty bad. So high ankle sprain refers to the ligaments connecting your tibia and your fibula above that general ankle. It's much more significant than a typical low ankle sprain we think when we just roll that ankle on the outside there. So it's one of those things that typically, even in mild cases, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to fully recover. I'm pretty shocked that the Jaguars are throwing him out there. I understand that he does look better. I've seen the practice film, things like that. His mobility is going to be limited. I think we're going to probably see something similar to what we saw in Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs last year, where it's going to be hard for him to move around. I also don't think Trevor Lawrence is Patrick Mahomes. I think I'm fully looking to fade the Jags this week. The Browns defense is already really tough. Now you got a situation where you're kind of got a liability back there. I understand that, maybe a 70% Trevor Lawrence might be better than a 100% CJ Beathard, but I mean, I am very excited from a betting aspect to take advantage of people thinking Trevor Lawrence is going to be Trevor Lawrence back there. I'm going full fade of the Jags and Trevor Lawrence today, especially no Christian Kirk as well, and no left tackle Walker Little. I think some of those things are getting overlooked.
Yeah, that's just confirming what I thought, that Trevor Lawrence is going to get beat up back there. Also, underdog, not a fan of him. The only thing you can play right now on Trevor Lawrence is higher or lower than 211 and a half passing yards. Dave, which way you going on that number?
I'm gonna go lower, and just because there's a high possibility he doesn't make it through this game, and if he plays one play, then he registers, and so Cleveland is such an aggressive front, and with the issues they have, because Walker Little wasn't even their, that's not their first left tackle, that's their second string left tackle, so they're down to their third string left tackle, which might be Anton Robinson, who is moving from right to the left tackle for the first time this season. I believe he played right tackle in college. He's a rookie. Myles Garrett, no gracias.
Cleveland has only allowed more than 211 passing yards 3 times this season. They gave it up to Indy, they gave it up to Seattle, and then they gave it up to LA Rams last week. Oh, I'm getting texted a question here. Brock Purdy or Justin Fields today?
It's 6 point or 4 point?
4 point.
I think I'd go Fields in a situation where we're seeing the weather here right on there. It's maybe a little bit difficult to throw the ball. It's going to just more encourage him to use his legs. They put up 26 points on the Lions last time. I think they're going to be scrappy in that game. I just think that Seattle game, likely no Geno Smith. It's going to be Drew Lock. It's going to be a little bit maybe lower scoring, and Purdy probably doesn't have to do as much as Fields will. So from the pure game script aspect, I would go Fields, but it is pretty close there.
My QB6, my QB7. So like flip a coin. I'll go Purdy because he's higher in my rankings, and I like that offense, and he doesn't have to deal with the weather that Fields has to deal with. You could see some fumbles. Fields has had some fumbling issues in the past, and that could be the difference in this one. It's great if he rushes a touchdown in, but if he has 2 fumbles and an interception, just erases that rushing touchdown.
So when I'm thinking about it, I can't get I love rushing quarterbacks in fantasy. I don't like having a non-mobile quarterback, and Brock Purdy just doesn't bring that rushing upside. And this week, as the 49ers take on the Seahawks, I just don't know that I'm all that excited about playing Brock Purdy. The last time he played them, he only threw for 200 yards. He was efficient, like he always is, 70% completion, but a touchdown and a pick. Last week against the Eagles, that felt like we're going to blow this up. We're going to blow them out this week to shut them up. And Justin Fields has been rushing close to 10 times a game since he got back. And even in a bad weather game, give me a guy who's going to rush the ball 10 times, could find the end zone. He also has 1 rushing touchdown on the year. So it feels like Justin Fields is almost due to come back and get a touchdown this week on the ground. So give me Justin Fields. Sebastian, what other injuries are you paying attention to? Guys who were on the fence and are now active this week.
Yeah, it's a couple of different guys. I'll start with some guys that we should be getting back, and I'm fully supporting. Hopefully a no-brainer, but I just want to re-emphasize Justin Jefferson coming back with that hamstring strain. I mean, grade 2, typically looking at like 4 to 6 week recovery time. He's now had 9 weeks to recover. So the team trusts him. He obviously trusts himself. So I love Justin Jefferson this week. I understand that the Ravens have a pretty decent pass defense, but I think that he kind of comes back with a vengeance this week and shows the world kind of what they've been missing. I know on Underdog, that's something I was targeting earlier in the week. They had it pretty low. I think that's the lowest total we're going to have. It was like 66 around. Another guy, Dallas Goedert, coming back from that forearm fracture. It's been very apparent that Eagles offense has just looked different without him on the field. They need somebody in that middle of the field so they can start spreading the ball around to A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. I love Dallas Goedert there. Both teams in Dallas and Philadelphia both struggle to cover the tight end. So I'm targeting both those tight ends in that game this week. Some guys. Oh, another guy I'll throw in there is Puka Nacua. Don't be scared off by that. Hopefully that second half he had should tell you that he's pretty good to go. Just a minor AC sprain there. Some other guys that we can more talk about. I'm kind of more questionable would be Aaron Jones. Looks like he's questionable now, and he's had a couple limited practices. I don't know if this is because he's burned me so much this season, but I'm kind of off of him. The injury, MCL sprain, if you're going to injure one of your ligaments, you kind of want it to be your MCL. It's got the most healing potential. But I don't think he's someone I can trust, especially this close to the playoffs. I'd love to get y'all's opinion on Aaron Jones, what you think this week.
Yeah, Jones has been – you've seen him come back from injury and then be limited. And so I don't think based on just – and I'm not a doctor, but just based on the fact that he was crying, getting carted off, and expecting him to play 2 weeks later, nervous about that. And, I think he sits at least one more week. And if he does play, I just don't have confidence he's going to go out and do it. This year it happened. He got hurt. He came back. People put him into lineups, and then he disappointed.
Yeah, and he's been disappointing all year. I don't want anything to do with Aaron Jones. The Packers, again, are weirdly winning games right now with Jordan Love under center. And it's not because they're running the ball spectacularly well. They're just finding ways to win, and they're winning ugly. And it's not maybe creating a bunch of fantasy opportunities for anybody up there. We got a good question here. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet or Jerick McKinnon coming off the groin injury. Sebastian, can you just talk to us about what's going on with the Seattle backs and how you're approaching that with those two guys?
Yeah, so we got three guys really dealing with some injuries here. So we'll start with the Seattle guys. Ken Walker III, oblique injury, right? So that's one of your core muscles there. Really rotational movements, one of those things that's going to be pretty bad. He has the history of a sports hernia, which kind of brings the concern up a little bit. They both were able to practice fully, the Seattle backs, on Friday, which is a good sign that they're going to play. Right. So Ken Walker and Charbonnet really with that knee injury that we didn't get a lot of. If there's just really, it's probably a bone bruise. They said significant swelling. They really didn't give much there. But both these guys, I think between the matchup of a tough San Francisco defense and you don't know what the split's going to be, I think it's going to be hard to really have faith in starting one of these guys. McKinnon obviously is in a similar situation with Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming off the groin. I think from a health standpoint, McKinnon is a little bit more trustworthy, but really all these guys, it's going to be one of those difficult situations about who you trust more. Likely no Geno Smith, so you're going to have Drew Lock. So maybe that means that Seattle's going to lean more on the run. I just don't know which guy they're really going to go with. So I almost like McKinnon a little bit more. I mean, this is really kind of a toss-up just because of his ability out of the backfield with no Isaiah Pacheco. I think Mahomes is going to need somebody to dump it off. So, but yeah, this is kind of one of those situations where they're all dealing with something and they're all probably going to be splitting carries. So it's not really a situation you love one way or the other.
All right. We got another question here. CJ Stroud at the Jets or Justin Fields versus the Lions? That one right there. We talked a little bit about these players in isolation. Now let's put them head to head.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Fields in this one. Both pretty poor weather. But I like both players. I just like Fields more.
Sebastian, where are you leaning with this one?
Yeah, so I agree with the Fields. I don't think Stroud's going to have a bad day. He's just got a tougher matchup. Honestly, the Lions defense has been definitely their weak point there. And then from the RB standpoint, I think I would go forward here. I think I would go forward. That Jacksonville defense doesn't scare me in any way. This may come up a little bit later, but I'm actually pretty high on Joe Flacco. I thought he did some good things with that Browns offense. I'm pretty high on the Browns in general. So I kind of would go forward there over Singletary splitting time with P. Ryan and, Edwards-Helaire. We just don't know what that's going to look like in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with CJ Stroud. I know I like the upside of Fields rushing, but Stroud has just been too good to sit this year. And then for the running backs, it's definitely Ford. Singletary, again, they're in a split backfield right now. He just got 9. He's had 9 and 12 touches the last 2 weeks. If they're going to feed him the ball, maybe. So you could, but even against a tough Jets run defense, I'm still maybe not all in on that. So give me Ford just because I think he has the safest path to volume. Whereas I think Singletary still, even if they're running the ball, is going to just get 10 to 15 touches, which isn't enough for him to really break out and be dominant the way he needs to be. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire is just a complete stay away right now. Sebastian, what about Breece Hall? How are you feeling about him this week?
Yeah, so from the injury standpoint, it seems like a minor low ankle sprain there. So just one of those kind of typical sprain it hurts those outside ligaments, which are the first to kind of go. So it doesn't really require that much damage to happen to them. So I'm a lot more trustworthy in general of guys with low ankle sprains and high ankle sprains. So again, it's kind of part of the reason I'm fading Trevor Lawrence. But I'm a lot less concerned about the injury and a lot more concerned about that offensive line. I just think, Breece Hall's explosive. And I think in a good offense, he's got some potential to really pop. I think that Jets offense, you have Zach Wilson, who was reportedly scared to even take the reins back, right? So you never want to – it's hard to have faith in an offense that's being led by a guy like that. So I would like to have other options. So I think from the injury standpoint, he's probably going to be okay. But if you throw in any injury and behind that offense is what scares me more than the injury itself.
I had some people questioning Dalvin Cook this week, and I was like, no.
No, I don't want anything to do with that Jets offense unless I have to play Garrett Wilson. Any thoughts, real quick, y'all? Any thoughts on Kyle Phillips? Quick hits.
It has to be a super, super deep league. Even if this guy gets 6 targets and catches all 6, he's going to get 36 yards. No touchdown potential, no yards after the catch. He's a great route runner, cool videos. Not on my fantasy team.
Yeah, I mean, as he cashed a 9-1 for me this year, so I'm always going to be impartial to him for the rest of the season. But I don't think you can really have much faith in him. With Treylon Burks being back too, we don't know what that's going to look like.
All right, it's time to, as we're wrapping up, what are we doing, gentlemen? How are we feeling? What are our underdog locks of today? What are we locking in? What are we building our entire underdog pick'em plays around?
What did we say earlier that we were like?
Oh, it was Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
it was the higher than 9.25. That was just like set it. If any underdog pick'em play you're building this week, you got to just lock that in. 9.25 is just free points with him. It's a free checkbox on the way to making it big. So Dave, what's your pick today?
I'm going to go with a higher than 0.5 rushing touchdowns for David Montgomery against Chicago.
Right. Higher than 0.5 rushing TDs against Chicago. I like it. Sebastian, where are you going with this?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with that Dallas game. Give me Dallas Goedert higher than 34.5 receiving yards.
I like it. Back from an arm break, should be able to get right back into things, as you talked about earlier. As we talked about earlier, I want all pieces of the Buffalo Bills game this week. So give me Josh Allen higher than 22.05 fantasy points That just feels like that's going to be an absolute shootout this week in Kansas City. Absolute homer play. I am 100% aware, but Josh Allen is back and having fun playing football, and the Bills are really good coming off the bye week.
I'd like to throw a lower in there. I like throwing lowers in there. And so Trevor Lawrence, 30.5 passing attempts, 19.5 completions, 211 passing yards, or 14.55 fantasy points. I feel like you can pick your poison there. I like the passing attempts and the completions.
Yeah, I like those. Yeah, because the only one I'd be scared of is the fantasy points in case he lucks his way into like a QB sneak in the goal line or something like that. It could kind of screw us there. So I like either completions or attempts or the yards, really. I don't think he gets any of them.
So let's go lower than completions. I think that's a good way to attack that. Just, it's wet, it's raining. There's a high probability people are going to be dropping balls. No Christian Kirk, which means it's Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley.
Yep. I like it.
So Vita Vea is out for Tampa. Do we want to attack the Atlanta rushing game, Algier rushing attempts, or Bijan? Bijan's yardage is pretty high. Algier's rushing attempts, he's beat that number 3 weeks in a row. Vita Vea was just announced out, and he's a big plugger in that defense for Tampa.
Yeah, you got a couple guys banged up. I know one of the linebackers is out too. I can't remember if it's White or if it's David.
So which one do you want to take out? Goddard, Montgomery, Ferguson, Allen, Lawrence?
We got 5. I mean, I'm good with it unless you guys want to take one out.
No, I think we roll. Yeah, I like Allen's anytime too. I mean, that anytime that's at plus money. I mean, he's hit that 8 out of 10 times. I think he needs it too. So I like the fantasy points because I think he needs to have a big day.
Yeah, and they're not giving any touchdown picks there with Josh Allen because he could have a 6 rushing touchdown game, a 7 passing touchdown day. Like it should just there are a million ways Josh Allen can score multiple touchdowns. So, all right, there we go. We're locking that in on Underdog. Thank y'all for joining us this week. Everybody have a great weekend. Good luck. And gentlemen, we'll see you next weekend in the playoffs.
Thanks, Make It Big.